Imagine a time long, long ago, a time before pyramids, a time before great empires. We journey back more than 6,000 years. Our story begins in a special place, a place called Mesopotamia. This name means the land between the rivers. The two rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates. They flowed through a dry, flat land, but the rivers brought life. They carried rich soil from the mountains. This soil was very good for growing food. People came to this land. They were looking for a good place to live. They found it here, between the two great rivers. In the spring, the rivers would flood. The water would rush over the plains, washing everything away. But after the flood, it left behind a layer of thick, dark mud. This mud, called silt, was like a gift. It made the soil incredibly fertile. The people learned to work with the rivers. They began to dig canals. These were small channels to carry water from the rivers to their fields. With irrigation, farming became much easier and more reliable. The Sumerians could grow more food than they needed. This extra food meant not everyone had to be a farmer. They could become builders, potters, leaders. The Sumerians were taking their first steps on a path that would change the world forever. They were building a new way of life in the ancient dust of Mesopotamia. With more food and more people, small villages began to grow larger and larger. Soon, not just villages anymore, cities. The Sumerians were the first city builders in human history. Around 4000 BCE, Uruk-ur-Eridu. These were organized centers of life. Imagine walking into one of these first cities. It would have been a bustling, noisy place. You would see houses made of mud bricks, packed closely together. Farmers brought their crops to the city market. Craftspeople sold their pottery and tools. At the center of each city stood a massive temple. This temple was called a ziggurat. It was a tall, stepped pyramid made of mud bricks. It looked like a stairway to the heavens. The Sumerians believed their gods lived at the very top. The city was built around this sacred place. Building these cities required incredible organization. The Sumerians had to work together on a massive scale. They needed leaders to plan the city's layout, workers to make millions of mud bricks. They needed engineers to design the canals that brought water into the city. They even built huge walls around their cities for protection. Life in the city was different from life in a small village. People had specialized jobs. This division of labor made society more efficient and complex. It also created social classes. This structure, with all its different parts, was the foundation of urban civilization. The Sumerians didn't just invent the city, they invented the complex society that makes a city work. As cities grew, life became more complicated. How do you keep track of all the grain in the temple storehouse? How do you record a trade agreement? The Sumerians needed a way to store information. At first, small clay tokens represented goods. Cone token, a measure of barley. Sphere token, a sheep. Tokens evolved into pictographs on wet clay. Drawings replaced tokens. A drawing of a head meant head. A stalk of barley meant barley. Combined pictures could express actions. Head plus bowl of food equals to eat. This was a huge leap forward. Then symbols began to represent sounds, not just objects. A scribe used a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks into soft clay. Cuneiform, wedge-shaped. It was faster than drawing pictures. Now, they could write down anything they could say. They could record laws, write letters, tell stories. The universe of human knowledge could now be preserved. Imagine a Sumerian scribe. You were part of an elite group. Not everyone could read or write. Years in a special school, the Adaba, learning hundreds of signs. Your skill was powerful. You were the memory of the city. My stylus is my tongue. This clay is my memory. I can make a king's words last forever. I can write down the stories of our gods and tales of heroes. Before me words vanished into the air. Now they are held in my hand, as solid as a brick, for all time. The Sumerians were tireless innovators, always finding new ways to solve problems. One of their most famous inventions was the wheel. But it probably wasn't used for transportation at first. The first wheels, appearing around 3500 BCE, were likely potter's wheels. They allowed artisans to make pottery faster and stronger. Only later did the Sumerians turn the wheel on its side and attach it to a cart, creating the first wheeled vehicles. Farming also took a giant leap forward. They invented the seed plow, a brilliant device that combined two jobs into one. It had a funnel that dropped seeds directly into the furrow as the plow cut through the soil. This was much more efficient than scattering seeds by hand, leading to bigger harvests. The Sumerians also looked up at the sky. They were keen astronomers. They watched the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. They saw patterns in the heavens. They were the first to divide the circle into 360 degrees. They created a calendar based on the cycles of the moon, with 12 lunar months. They also invented the idea of dividing time. They gave us the 60-second minute and the 60-minute hour. Every time you look at a clock, you are seeing a piece of Sumerian thinking. They were also skilled metallurgists, learning to mix copper and tin to create bronze. The Bronze Age began here. This new metal led to better tools and stronger weapons. These inventions fundamentally changed how people interacted with the world. The wheel made the world smaller. The plow made the earth more generous. Their understanding of time and numbers brought order to the universe. The Sumerians weren't just living in the world, they were actively reshaping it with their incredible creativity and intelligence. To understand the Sumerians, we must listen to their voices. Thanks to Cuneiform, we can. One of the most famous voices belongs to a king named Gilgamesh. He was the king of Uruk, around 2700 BCE. His story is told in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's first great works of literature. In the story, Gilgamesh is a powerful but harsh ruler. Let's imagine his voice booming across the city square. I am Gilgamesh, 2/3 god, 1/3 man. I built the walls of Uruk, walls that shine like copper in the sun. Look upon my city. The epic tells us that the people prayed to the gods to send someone to temper their arrogant king. The gods created Enkidu, a wild man who lived with the animals. He challenged Gilgamesh and they fought. But after their battle, they became the closest of friends. Together, they went on great adventures. They traveled to the cedar forest to fight a fearsome monster. Gilgamesh's voice filled with adventure. Come, Enkidu, my friend, let us make a name that will never be forgotten. Tragically, Enkidu dies and Gilgamesh is overwhelmed with grief. For the first time, the mighty king is confronted with death. He becomes terrified of his own mortality. He sets out on a desperate journey to find the secret of eternal life, traveling to the ends of the earth. His quest is a failure. He learns that immortality is for the gods alone. He returns to Uruk a changed man, wiser and more humble. At the end of the epic, his voice is no longer arrogant. Look at Uruk, I built this city. This is my legacy. A man cannot live forever, but what he builds can. The story of our lives, the cities we build, the children we raise, that is what endures. Religion was at the very center of Sumerian life. They believed the world was controlled by powerful gods and goddesses. Not always kind or gentle, unpredictable and demanding, like Mesopotamia itself. The god of the air was Enlil. The god of water and wisdom was Enki. The goddess of love and war was Inanna. The Sumerians believed that humans were created to serve the gods. They had to keep the gods happy. If they didn't, the gods might send floods, famine, disease. The main way to serve, rituals and offerings at the temple. A priest was very important in Sumerian society. Let's imagine a senior priest speaking to an apprentice. Remember, the god is our master. This city is his property. We are his servants. Every morning we wake the god's statue. We wash it, we dress it in fine clothes. We bring food and drink, the best from the harvest and from the herd. The Sumerians had a grim view of the afterlife. They believed everyone went to the same place after death. Kur, a dark, shadowy underworld. Souls wandered aimlessly, eating clay, drinking dirty water. There was no heaven or hell, no judgment or reward. So they focused on this life. They wanted to achieve greatness, to build a legacy on earth. This relationship with the gods shaped their entire society. The temple was the economic center of the city. It owned vast amounts of land, workshops, storehouses. It collected taxes in grain and livestock. The king was seen as the god's chief representative on earth. His authority came from the gods, politics, economy, religion, all woven together, with the gods at the very top. The history of Sumer is a story of competing city-states. They fought over land, water rights, trade routes. For many centuries, no single city dominated for long. Powerful kings would rise, conquer neighbors, create small empires that soon fell apart. A famous early ruler was Sargon of Akkad. He was not a Sumerian but conquered all the Sumerian city-states around 2334 BCE. He created the world's first true empire, bringing peace and prosperity, though his empire eventually collapsed. After the fall of Sargon's empire, the Sumerian cities regained independence. This led to a final brilliant burst of civilization. The period called the Third Dynasty of Ur began around 2100 BCE under King Ur-Nammu, a great builder and wise ruler. He united the Sumerian cities through diplomacy. He rebuilt temples, repaired canals, encouraged trade. One of Ur-Nammu's greatest achievements was creating the world's oldest known law code, written on clay tablets. The laws were surprisingly fair. Unlike later codes, Ur-Nammus often used fines rather than harsh punishment. For example, if one man hurt another's foot, he paid 10 shekels of silver. The goal was to compensate the victim, not just punish. Under Ur-Nammu and his son Shulgi, Sumerian culture reached its peak. Art, literature, and science flourished. Scribes copied ancient texts, preserving knowledge. The empire was well organized with governors and tax collectors. It seemed as though Sumerian civilization would last forever. This was their golden age. The ziggurat at Ur was rebuilt into a magnificent structure. Trade routes stretched far and wide. For a brief shining moment, Sumer was the undisputed center of the world, a beacon of order and learning. Even golden ages must end. The great civilization of Sumer did not fall in a single day. It was a slow decline caused by several problems. One of the biggest problems came from farming itself. The irrigation water contained salt that built up in the soil over centuries. Over time, the soil became so salty that crops struggled to grow. Harvests grew smaller, creating food shortages. As the Sumerian heartland weakened, nomadic peoples pressed in from surrounding hills and deserts. The Sumerian kings had to spend more resources on defense, building walls and maintaining armies. These external pressures combined with internal problems created a perfect storm. The final blow came around 2004 BCE. Invaders from the east, the Elamites, swept into Sumer. They captured Ur and burned it to the ground. They took the last Sumerian king away in chains. It was a catastrophic end. The Sumerian cities were destroyed or taken over by new rulers like the Amorites. The cities crumbled into dust. Their language was forgotten. For thousands of years their civilization was lost to history. But the Sumerians were not truly gone. Their ideas had spread through the Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans. They are like a hidden river that flows beneath our world. We are all children of Sumer. Think about a week. It has 7 days. Think about a clock. 60 minutes, 60 seconds. When a farmer plows a field, when a truck carries goods, when a leader writes down a law. The city, writing, the wheel, law. These are the pillars of civilization, and the Sumerians laid the foundation. The Sumerians were first to write down the great myths and questions that still haunt us. What is our purpose? How do we face mortality? They looked at a challenging world and did not despair. They used intelligence and cooperation to build something entirely new. Their civilization may be gone, but their cosmic journey continues through us. We are the inheritors of their dreams, their inventions, and their enduring quest for knowledge.